Hello friends! I've gotten so many requests to share my favorite holiday reads, and yes, I absolutely love reading. I think most of us here love reading, and it's one of my most favorite ways to feel some sort of holiday spirit during this time of year. It's just the best form, or my most preferred form of self-care, to just get lost out of this world in the worlds of my favorite books with my most loved characters and just be totally transported for a little while and somehow inspired by their adventures in my own life. Whether it's nonfiction or fiction, I always gain some form of new perspective on my reality. And during the holidays, I prefer for that perspective to be kind of rose-tinted or romanticized, if I'm honest. I mean, why not? The holidays are a time for love, childhood magic, community, so on and so forth. So I thought that I would share with you guys my favorite holiday reads. However, I also conveniently have an order ready for pickup from Powell's, a local bookstore, and I also so happen to have a gift card. So I thought that it would be fun to take you guys to Powell's, do some book perusing, and see if we can find some books to add to my holiday reading list. So if you have not already, go ahead and make yourselves a heartwarming cup of tea, grab your coziest of comfy blankets, and let's go peruse some books. I really enjoyed this. Of course, I have the biggest stack of holiday reads. I better set these down before they fall over. Okay, okay. Oh, that's good. Okay, friends, let's talk about books. So really quick, I'll just show you what I got at Powell's. The book that I had put in an order for and picked up was Wintering: The Power of Rest and Retreat in Difficult Times by Catherine May. This book has been recommended to me many times over, and I finally bought it, and I began reading it in a cafe after going to Powell's, and whew, it drew me right in and felt like medicine for my soul as I was reading. So this book could not have come at a better time. I think it's the perfect read as we enter into winter. Already it feels so comforting and encouraging, and definitely inspires rest and some self-compassion. And then the book that I found and bought while at Powell's is Red Rising by Pierce Brown. I found a used copy for $11.95, and this was totally random and not at all festive. It does not fall within my festive reads category. However, I have a fun story behind this, and it's that I was perusing the books in Powell's and wandered into the sci-fi and fantasy section, looking specifically for the lighthearted romance section for some holiday reads, and I bumped into a stranger, total stranger, and I said, "Oh, sorry, excuse me," and he turned around and looked at me and said, "What do you recommend?" And I said, "You want me to recommend you a book?" And he was like, "Yes." And he had no idea who I am. I had no idea who he is. Just a complete stranger who asked me for a book recommendation. So naturally, I completely forgot every single book that I've ever read. When faced with a stranger in person, I froze. And I was also in the sci-fi fantasy section, which I do not read a lot of sci-fi and fantasy. However, my eyes fell upon The Fifth Season by N.K. Jemisin, which I have read and really enjoyed. The world building is incredible, and the storyline is shocking, or just it's a really good unraveling of a story with a surprise ending. I've only read the first book. It's a trilogy, I think. But yes, very well written. Absolutely brutal as far as storyline goes, because it does take place in a post-apocalyptic setting. But anyways, I ended up recommending The Fifth Season to this stranger, and he picked it up and decided he was going to buy it. So then I asked him for a recommendation, at which point he pulled Red Rising off the shelf and recommended it to me. And so I bought it, and when I was checking out, the man who was checking me out said, "I absolutely love this book," and he could not recommend it enough. So this is very, very random, but I'm very excited to give it a go. And also, it was so fun to quite literally bump into a stranger and get a book recommendation and give a book recommendation. In fact, I think I might follow suit, and next time I'm at a bookstore, I'll ask a stranger for a book recommendation. For now though, I'm going to recommend you guys my favorite holiday reads. And I guess in a way, I am recommending books to complete strangers. However, it does not feel that way. My booktube community feels like family. So friends, let's talk books. I am going to continue reading Wintering this month and next month. It's a great book to enter the new year with, and following in this vein, some other books I have to actually recommend are Seeking Slow, Reclaim Moments of Calm in Your Day. I got it. Not very calmly, I might add, but still, I got it. Yes, Seeking Slow by Melanie Barnes. So this is basically a book that aims to help people to just slow down and be more present. It's a really cozy, encouraging mindfulness read. Next is The Cozy Life, Rediscover the Joy of Simple Things through the Danish Concept of Hygge by Pia Edberg. This is such a cool, small book. It would make a great stocking stuffer. So it's broken down into different parts. The first one explains what exactly is Hygge. Next, how to adopt and live this lifestyle. And then it has really cool activities like prompts to journal to, or recipes to follow, including tea recipes. There's a sleeping routine, dream pillow instructions, and so on and so forth. It's very applicable to everyday life, but also really fun and not at all overwhelming as far as best life workbooks go. For a quick read, I recommend 84 Charing Cross Road by Helen Hump. This gives me Call the Midwives vibe. This gives me Call the Midwife vibes. It also reminds me of the Guernsey Literary and Potato Peel Pie Society. I have spoken about this book before, but it feels like this book inspired the Guernsey Literary and Potato Peel Pie Society. And it's basically a collection of correspondence that actually happened and actually were exchanged between a woman and employees at a bookstore during, if I remember correctly, or immediately after World War II. It's heartwarming, but also real life. Next, I have A Christmas Carol by Charles Dickens. I love reading this each Christmas. It's something that I did as a child and in school and have just continued into my adult life. It always puts me in the Christmas spirit. The Deal of a Lifetime by Frederick Backman. This is another really short book, short story. There are lots of illustrations. It is an adult book. The illustrations do not make it a children's story. And I know that it's short, but it is poignant. Definitely a tearjerker, but if you need a splash in the face of cold water to remind yourself of what's really important in life during the holidays, this book will do it. The next book I'd like to recommend, I have the audiobook version of, and it is the Hygge Holiday, and I can't remember the author. It's like Rosamund or Rosie. You guys will know because it will be on the screen. But this is a wonderful, light-hearted holiday rom-com that is extra cozy and Hygge centered. In case you haven't noticed, I love Hygge, especially during the holidays. The next book I'd love to recommend is The Storified Life of A.J. Fikri by Gabrielle Zevin. She just came out with another book that is doing really well. I believe it's called Tomorrow, Tomorrow, Tomorrow. So same author. And whew, this book is really good. It is a love letter to literature, and it centers around a very grumpy man who runs a bookstore. Love that trope. However, this man isn't an old man, which I feel like normally it's an old grumpy man in a bookstore. He's actually in his mid-30s. There's a little bit of romance, a lot of real life drama, if you will. I guess there are great highs and then a lot of low lows. It's a roller coaster and it's absolutely beautiful. Definitely recommend. My audiobook of choice this Christmas time is Whiteout by Danielle Clayton and a variety of other authors, actually. From what I've read, it seems like a heartwarming rom-com that centers around the chaos brought on by a sudden snowstorm in a place where it doesn't normally snow. And lastly, for my adult fiction holiday recommendations, I have The Bookshop on the Corner by Jenny Colgan. I haven't actually read this book yet, but it is my book club pick on my Patreon, so we're reading it this month. And so many of my patrons recommended it, so I feel like I'm going to really enjoy it. And just from reading the summary on the back, it centers around Nina Redman, who we've met before in another Jenny Colgan book, who's recently lost her job as a librarian and so moves to a small town expecting to have a quiet life, only to discover adventure, magic, and soul in said quiet place. I think it's going to be a really heartwarming read. Switching genres, I have my selection of children's literature and middle grade books. I'll begin with the classics, and of course, to be expected is Little Women by Louisa May Alcott. I absolutely adore this story. I read it most every Christmas time, and it is such a comfort. It also helps me to bear any burden better. I'm just always inspired by the March sisters and how they handle hardship. The audiobook adaptation is also really good. If you have not read Little Women and you're intimidated by its vast size or just don't have the time to sit down and read such a big book, I do so highly recommend the audiobook, and both movie adaptations are really wonderful and quite accurate, actually. Next is A Little Princess by Frances Hodgson Burnett. Excuse me. Next is A Little Princess by Frances Hodgson Burnett. This is a classic that I had the pleasure of reading for the very first time last Christmas, and it absolutely melted my heart. It follows a very loved, well cared for girl who is suddenly orphaned and finds herself thrown into poverty and really gruesome work, yet has a total heart of gold and never quite loses touch with her childhood magic and somehow brightens the lives of everyone around her. And closing out the classics category, I have The Night Before Christmas, the Classic Edition by Clement C. Moore, illustrated by Charles Santor. This copy is so beautifully illustrated. Oh, I love the reds and then the blues. Oh, it's just such a good one. Whoops. That was a note that fell out. This was gifted to me last Christmas by my adopted aunt. Thank you so much, Kathleen. Whenever I read this story, I am immediately reconnected to my childhood magic and wonder. It just reminds me of what it was like to be a kid on Christmas Eve and the excitement of Santa coming. Peter Pan by J.M. Barrie. This isn't exactly a Christmas read or a holiday read by any means, actually, but it is childhood wonder and childhood magic and mischief and imagination and adventure and tea all wrapped up in one book, and I absolutely adore it. The narrator is also totally wonderful, silly, and yet totally serious. Also, there is an audiobook adaptation read by Jim Dale, who did the Harry Potter audiobooks. So if you love Jim Dale, I recommend listening to his reading of Peter Pan. Green Glass House by Kate Milford. I read this book my first Christmas in Portland, so it's a bit nostalgic for me. I just noticed Rue behind me in the chair. Are you quite comfortable? Do you have a book that you'd like to recommend? That's a no. But yes, I read this about 5 years ago, and it's a very cozy holiday mystery novel. And it is children's literature, but the mystery is really well done, I think. Then I have The Book Wanderers by Anna James, which is part of the Pages & Co. series. I said that like a question. I never know if things are series or trilogies or duologies. This is a really, really fun story of a girl who can enter into books and meet her favorite characters, which is essentially what we all do when we read. But the main character of this book can quite literally walk around within these stories and even bring the characters out into her world. Within this book, we get to meet Alice from Alice in Wonderland, Anne of Green Gables, Sherlock Holmes, which whenever I'm asked if I could meet any literary character, I always say Sherlock Holmes. I think he would be fascinating to meet in person. Oh, I think we also meet Elizabeth Bennet. Really adorable. Next on my list is Snow and Rose by Emily Winfield Martin, who also does the illustrations. This is just a really, really cozy retelling of the classic fairy tale Snow and Rose, and it has these beautiful illustrations. This is a great gift book for your mom or your sister if you have one. It centers around two sisters and their mother who live in a cabin in the forest, and lots of magic and mischief goes on within the forest. Next, I'd like to recommend The Boy, the Mole, the Fox, and the Horse by Charlie Mackesy. Reading this book was such a healing experience. It's very, very simple. There are very few words, and there are illustrations. They're ink illustrations, and they're also quite simple, but whew, the heart of this book is so powerful, so strongly felt, and I think has been made even more profound through the simplicity of the language. This is another really good gift book for children and adults alike. So, so, so highly recommend. And lastly, I have Goodnight, Mr. Tom by Michelle Magorian. I have not read this book, but it was gifted to me. It is a wartime story about a little boy who is displaced from London because of the war, but finds a home and a community in a new place. And I think he may or may not have a furry friend, a pet dog. It could be an imaginary friend, but this seems like one of those books that's going to absolutely pull my heartstrings, and I look forward to reading it. So, those are all my holiday reads. Please let me know if you have any book recommendations that I haven't already recommended. I've read most all of these books. In fact, there's only 4 that I haven't read, so I'm in desperate need of some new holiday reads. That being said, all this talk of books has me really wanting to read, so I'm going to make myself my 3rd heartwarming cup of tea for the day and cozy up with Catherine May's Wintering. Thank you so much for being here, friends. Happy reading!
is Amber, and I am from Oklahoma City. I've really gone through a lot this past year, and when the holidays come around, everything really seems to be amplified, specifically my anxiety. And in the past year and a half, I've undergone multiple diagnoses and a variety of health issues. I feel like I'm not doing enough, and I feel like social media tells me that I need to have a perfect morning routine and a perfect nighttime routine and habits that quote-unquote stack or build off of each other, etc. But for some of us, that's really not the case, and it really becomes difficult and hard to function in a world that everyone else is seemingly perfect, but you're the only one that's seemingly not. So I wanted to tell everybody that it's okay not to have the perfect routines or the perfect life circumstances, because at the end of the day, it all comes down to what's perfect for you and how you are growing through each part of your life. One of my favorite quotes that I saw on Pinterest was, "The fact that you are trying is proof that you are strong." And nothing has ever resonated with me as much as that quote has, because I feel like I'm constantly trying, but oftentimes I lack the strength to continue, and sometimes that's okay as long as I'm trying and as long as I continue to try. So I hope that this can reach someone who is going through something similar, and I hope that they know how loved they are and how worthy they are of the life that they are setting out to create for themselves. Thank you so much, Morgan. Happy holidays, everyone.